Professor Dr. N. Ganesh is working as a senior faculty, Department of Computer Science and Engineering, SRM University, City Campus, Vadapalani, Chennai. He has more than 12 years of undergraduate and postgraduate teaching experience, which includes 5 years of research experience. He has trained many corporate batches on technologies such as mainframes, Application Systems 400, SAP, ABAP. He has published 10 articles in both international and national journals. He has presented several papers in both national and international conferences. He has written 4 books which are prescribed in Anna University affiliated colleges, SRM University and Bharat University. His research interests are software engineering, data mining and cloud computing.
Welcome to UGC lecture series in computer science. We are going to see a series of lecture in the subject operating systems. This subject belongs to the BSc undergraduate program pertaining to semester 5 of paper 8. So, in which we are going to concentrate part of the unit 2. The unit 2 comprises of topics such as process synchronization, critical section problem, synchronization hardware, semaphores, classical problems of synchronization, critical region, monitors, deadlocks, characterization, methods for handling deadlock, deadlock prevention, avoidance, detection and recovery. In our previous lecture, we have seen the deadlocks and its characterization and the methods of handling a deadlock situation. So, in today's lecture, we will be seeing how to prevent a deadlock situation and how to avoid a deadlock situation. So, that is for today's session, and in which we will be seeing the contents for today's session. The contents are deadlock prevention, types of deadlock prevention, deadlock avoidance and the approaches to deadlock avoidance. Now, what is a deadlock prevention? So, before we go into this deadlock prevention, we will just have a quick recap of what we have seen in our previous session. We saw what a deadlock is, how it occurs. What is a deadlock? A deadlock is a situation wherein any of the resources will not be moving on or will not be in a position to work. It comes to a standstill. I explained this with an example relating to it that you face on a day-to-day life. That is an example that relates to a traffic movement, wherein in the previous class you saw a picture which shows the trucks and buses which comes to a standstill because and it is not able to move. No buses are able to move because of such a huge traffic. So, that example is called as a deadlock, where all the resources have been occupied by some kind of process and everything comes to a standstill and nothing works out. That is a deadlock. So, how do you avoid? What are the conditions for a deadlock to happen? That also we saw in the last session. There were 4 conditions that were being discussed. One was on mutual exclusion. The second condition which we saw was hold and wait. The third topic, the third necessary condition that we saw was no preemption. The fourth condition that we saw was a circular wait, and then we went on to giving certain examples of the deadlocks even. Apart from this, I gave you the different types of resources, and after that we saw how to deal with the deadlocks. Apart from this, we as well saw the topic on how to detect a deadlock and how to overcome or how to test a particular deadlock condition. So, before it occurs, how to test it. So, we saw 3 different types out of which, in which the type 1 is called as a reactive approach, type 2 is a proactive approach, type 3 is ignoring a problem. What is a reactive approach? In the reactive approach, we have seen topics such as like before a deadlock happens, how we need to encounter it, how we need to solve it. What is a proactive approach? after a deadlock happens, what should be done? What is the immediate resource or what is the immediate source of work that you need to carry out in order to overcome such a deadlock? And the third one was the ignore the problem. So after the deadlock occurs, you will be waiting for some time and you will be ignoring a problem, for which I gave you an example even as an ostrich approach. What does an ostrich do? An ostrich keeps its heads under the sand and pretends as if no such problem has occurred. That is, in real terms, in terms of computers, your system will be waiting for a quite amount of time till a process gets completed. That is called as, these are the three events that we saw, and this is how we will be detecting and we will be testing a deadlock. And in today's class, we will be seeing topics on deadlock prevention and on deadlock avoidance and what are the problems pertaining to deadlock avoidance. We can see the topics, the examples of a banker's algorithm, the banker's approach. What do you mean by a banker's approach? And then we will also see an example on dining philosopher's problem. Now, let us get back to today's event. In today's event, the first and foremost topic that is to be covered is the deadlock prevention. What is a deadlock prevention? From the name implies, you are going to prevent a deadlock before it occurs. Okay, how do you prevent a deadlock? So, how do you know that a deadlock is going to happen? So, it mainly comes through experience, and if you know that you have sufficient amount of resources available for the process to work on, then you can prevent a deadlock. You can avoid a deadlock. Now, we will see the different types of deadlock prevention. As far as the deadlock prevention is concerned, it is broadly classified into two groups. One is called as a direct approach. Second one is called as an indirect approach. First, what we will do is we will see an indirect approach, then we will go on to the direct approach. I suppose you might be knowing what are the necessary conditions for handling a deadlock. We have seen 4 different conditions. Number 1 is said to be mutual exclusion. Number 2 is said to be hold and wait. Number 3 is said to be no preemption. Number 4 is said to be circular wait. So, out of which the first 3 conditions, number 1 mutual exclusion, number 2 hold and wait, number 3 no preemption, are said to be called as, comes under the category of indirect deadlock prevention, and the number 4 circular wait comes under the category of direct deadlock prevention. Now, what is an indirect deadlock prevention? How do you say that these 3 conditions come under the indirect deadlock prevention as? Let us see. In the indirect deadlock prevention, the first point states mutual exclusion, it cannot be disallowed. What does it mean? Which means it can be allowed. So, you need to allocate a resource in such a way that only one particular resource will be working at one particular instance of time. Only one particular process will be working at one particular instance of time. So, you are going to use only one resource in one instance of time. Second point is hold and wait. So, first of all, I will read out this point and then I will give you an explanation. Hold and wait, it can be prevented by ensuring that the process requires all of its required resources at one time, blocking the process until all requests can be granted simultaneously. For example, wherein if you are going to travel in a bus, you have only one seat available, out of which some 3 members are standing on the line and standing in the bus, and if they are going to stand, supposing if only one chair is available, if you could find those 3 members happens to be, one as a young man, the second one is said to be a little child aged somewhere around 10 years old, let us consider. The third one is said to be a pregnant lady. To whom will you give the seat? Hopefully, you will be giving the seat to a pregnant lady because she has to travel. And supposing if that lady, so if she is going to sit on one particular portion, the other 2 are standing across, which means that one process, one resource is being occupied, one chair is being occupied that one particular lady. So the chair happens to be called as a resource. That lady is the process. So she is sitting and the other two are standing. Consider, so the other two are waiting in the queue. Consider that particular lady gets out in the next forthcoming bus stop. So the chair again remains empty. So now there are other two people standing across. So to whom the chair will be allocated? Either to an young man aged 25 years or to a child who is aged somewhere around 10 to 12 years old. So that kind of process, it will be decided, that kind of resource allocation will be decided by the computer itself, by the operating system itself. So either one will be sitting. We cannot ask two members to sit together, and if 2 or 3 members are going to occupy the same set of seat, then that particular chair, it cannot accommodate 3 members and it comes to a standstill. So it gets blocked out. So that is for this hold and wait. Then the third indirect deadlock prevention is on no preemption. What is no preemption? Again, as I said, I will read out the first topic. No preemption. If a process holding certain resources is denied a further request, that process must release its original resource. If a process requests a resource that is currently held by another process, the operating system may preempt the second process and require it to release its resource. Say for example, again I read out the second point. If a process requests a resource that is currently held by another process, the operating system may preempt the second process and require it to release its resource. Which means, again let us consider the previous example of a chair that is available in a bus. In that case, wherein it will be waiting until that pregnant lady gets down in the next bus stop. So what happens here? So if it is going to wait until this is, what do you mean by no preemption? No preemption is you are not going to until that particular resource is, until the process gets completed, that particular resource will not be emptied. So that is called as no preemption. So till she gets down in the next stop, we will not be allocating that resource to a other person, which means till she gets down in the next stop, the chair will not be free for either for the candidate, either for the young man or for the little child. So that is called as no preemption. Then these are the three types which we have seen for an indirect deadlock prevention. Now let us go into a direct deadlock prevention. The type for a direct deadlock prevention is circular wait. So as far as the circular wait is concerned, again let me read out. Circular wait can be prevented by using a linear ordering of resource types. If a process has been allocated resource of type R, then it may subsequently request only those resources of types following R in the ordering. Let us consider deadlock is a situation where no process will be in a position to work. What does it mean? Say for example, if there are 3 processes and if there are 3 resources. If 3 resources have been occupied by this 3 processes, then everything comes to a standstill. Nothing will be working out. So what do we need to do in that case? So if nothing is going to be working out, then at that point of time, supposing if the process 2 is asking for a resource from process A, asking for the resource A, then supposing if the process A is willing to allow, it can accommodate the process 2's request, and wherein that particular resource A can be accommodated, because anyhow it is in a blocked state. Anyhow nothing is working out because of a deadlock. So at that condition, say for example, there are 3 people in a cage. They have been put in a cage, and if one guy has some rice, and if other guy is hungry, and if the third guy is not having anything, no penny in his pocket, so what will he be doing? He will be taking that rice and he will be eating across. So anyhow all 3 are in this cage, so they will be eating. So he can give the resource to the guy 2. So this is for a direct deadlock prevention. This is an example for a circular wait. Let us have a small break, and then we will continue after the break. Welcome back. In the circular weight, which we have seen as a direct deadlock prevention method, as one of the type of deadlock prevention is direct deadlock prevention. So in which we have seen about the circular weight. I gave you an example of 3 people waiting inside a cage. They have been arrested and they have been kept inside a cage. Supposing if by any chance, let us consider that person 1 has some kind of food stuff with them, and let us consider person 2 is hungry, very much hungry, and person 3 has some money in his pocket. Anyhow, all 3 persons have been put in a cage, so no one can escape from the cage, but they need to while away the situation, they need to while away the timing. So what will they do? So if the person 2 is very hungry, this person 1, and if he is going to ask person 1 for the food to be provided to him, so that person 1, if he is willing, he can give the food, and in turn, if the person 2 is going to speak to person 3 for some kind of payment to the person 1, and if person 3 is willing to shed his money from his pocket, then he can pay the money to person 1. So in turn, all 3 will be satisfied, because person 1 is not hungry, person 2 is hungry, so he has taken some food from person 1, and for which the person 3 has also paid the amount. So which means all 3 is working out, and because of this, this deadlock can be prevented even, but it takes a quite amount of time. So this is an example for a direct deadlock prevention. Now let us go into the second topic, the deadlock avoidance. How to avoid a deadlock situation. So in which, let me read out, a deadlock avoidance. A decision is made dynamically whether the current resource allocation request will, if granted, potentially lead to a deadlock. Requires knowledge of future process request. What does it mean? Requires knowledge of future process request. So if you know the future availability, suppose if you are married, if you have a wife, and if you have some 2 children, and in your pocket, let us consider you have 10 rupees, and if your first son comes in and if he is going to ask you for 3 rupees, and if your second son is going to ask you for another 3 rupees, so you have got 6 rupees, you have spent 6 rupees, and how much amount is remaining in your pocket? 4 rupees remains. So, and if your wife comes now, so how much you can give her? You can give only 4 rupees. You cannot give more than that. Supposing if she is going to demand 5 rupees, then again that situation comes to a deadlock. So considering your wife's condition, wife's mindset, considering that she will not be asking more than 4 rupees, so you can very well spend 6 rupees to your children, that is 3 rupees each. So that is, you are knowing well in advance that your wife will not be demanding any amount from you at all. So that is a concept of deadlock avoidance. So before knowing prior hand how what sort of resource will be required, how much of process is required, and if you are going to know everything well in advance, we will be knowing how to avoid a deadlock situation. That is one point. The other point is, as far as the previous slide is concerned, a decision is made dynamically whether the current resource allocation request will, if granted, potentially lead to a deadlock. So you need to dynamically allocate a resource. You need to know, and this comes only through experience. So you need to know, okay, if I am going to allocate this, I can avoid a deadlock. If I am not allocating this, I may encounter in a deadlock. So that is a situation. So now let us see the approaches of a deadlock avoidance. There are 3 different approaches of a deadlock avoidance. Point number 1, process initial denial. Point number 2, it is not efficient strategy. Point number 3, resource allocation denial. As far as point number 1 is concerned, process initial denial. Do not start a process if it demands might lead to a deadlock. A process is started if the maximum needs of all current processes plus the needs of the process can be met. So, you are not supposed to start a process even if you know that this might encounter in a deadlock, and you might not allocate the entire resource to a person. I will explain this with an example that has been taking place in the banks. So, I will give you a day-to-day example that you really encounter. The second point deals with not efficient strategy. It assumes that all processes will make maximum claims together. So, let us assume wherein if there is a bank or if there is a pawnbroker wherein if you are going to ask for a loan amount, if you are going to ask somewhere around 100 rupees, or let us consider a different example wherein the government is going to allocate or give you bonus. So, it is a festival time. So, the government will be, so we as an employee will be expecting as much hike of bonus or as much benefit as possible, right? So, what happens is that as the government, we will be expecting somewhere around 25% hike in from your present salary as a bonus, and supposing the government is going to give you only 7%, right? So, we need to accommodate even. So, again, as a second point, this states that not efficient strategy assumes that all processes will make maximum claims together, as all the employees will be asking for, will be demanding or will be urging the government to give them 25%, wherein the government has given only 8%. Supposing if the government gives you 25% and if you expect 25% and if they give you 30%, which means definitely you can spend a lot, you can enjoy the festive season, you can purchase whatever you want, and thereby you can avoid all sort of fights in your family, all sort of disputes in your family, and thereby the deadlock situation can be avoided. Supposing rather than in other case, if the government is not going to give you 25% or 30% as expected, and if it is going to give you only 8%, then definitely there will be a dispute in your family. Your wife or your spouse may be asking you for a better clothing wherein you will not be in a position to get those clothes, which results in a deadlock situation because of the fight scenario that takes place in your family. So, this is an example for a deadlock avoidance approach for not efficient strategy. The third point is resource allocation denial. Do not grant an incremental resource request to a process if this allocation might lead to a deadlock. I gave you an example of having 10 rupees in your pocket wherein your two sons are asking for money, and if you are going to give them 3 rupees each, right, you have spent 6 rupees. You have only 4 rupees in your pocket. So, how do you earn? Supposing the wife comes with a demand of asking you for 2 more rupees extra, like if she is going to ask you for 6 rupees extra, or in other words, at the first instance, if she has asked you for 3 rupees and you have given her, so how much of amount is remaining in your pocket? You have only 1 rupee remaining in your pocket, and now she comes with the demand of asking for 4 rupees. So, wherein you have a shortage of 3 rupees. So, as the third point says, you can allocate a resource, but you cannot give them an incremental resource. That is, based on only once you can allocate a resource. At the first instance of time itself, she should have asked you 4 rupees rather than asking 3 rupees, and she should have emptied your pocket. But she has not done that. She has asked only 3 rupees. And now if she is going to put a second demand, you should not give it. You can give only 1 rupee in a real time scenario. But here, if the resource has been allocated once, it cannot allocate again and again. It should not allocate again and again. So, that is the third point, the resource allocation denial. So, we will see an example for all these 3 points, which is called as a banker's algorithm. What do you mean by a banker's algorithm? This banker's algorithm is also called as a safety algorithm. Why do we call it as a safety algorithm? We will be seeing it shortly. Now, what does a banker's algorithm? Fine. Let us consider you people are going to a bank. So, when you are going to a bank, what will you ask for? Supposing if you have dreamt for building a house in your nearby place. So, if you are going to build a house and if you are running short of money, you will definitely end up landing in the banks. So, what do people do in the bank? You go to the bank, you ask them, I need 10 lakhs sir to build my house. So, when you ask the manager for 10 lakhs, do you think that your manager, the bank manager, he will be immediately releasing 10 lakhs and he will be giving it to you? Definitely not. He will be giving you only 2 lakhs or 1 lakh based on the income that you have shown to your bank account, to your bank manager. So, based on that only he will be releasing the money. So, in that scenario, you will be getting only 2 lakhs. But what have you have asked for 10 lakhs. You mean to say that the bank does not have a sufficient set of balance of 10 lakhs in the bank? No, they do have 10 lakhs. But the thing is, you might be asking for 10 lakhs. The other person, he in turn will be asking for 15 lakhs. The third person, he will be asking for 25 lakhs. So, the bank has to support everyone. So, that is the reason the bank will be giving you only the limited set of money that is required. And after giving the entire money to other people even, supposing if the bank is left out with some kind of money, then if you are going to approach them and if you are going to ask them, there is a possibility that they may give you. But generally, the banks, whatever if you ask, they will be giving you only 10% or the 20% maximum of the amount that you have asked, and it also relies upon the income that you have earned and that you have shown it on the bank as a deposit amount. Fine. Let us now relate this example with the system example. In this, again, in the second slide, here we explain the algorithm. The algorithm determines whether a given state of the system is safe or unsafe. The state of a system is represented by the current allocation of resource to processes. The state of the system is represented by the current allocation of resource to the process. Thus, the state consists of two vectors, resource and available, and the two matrices. What are the two matrices? Claim and allocation. When do you call a state to be a safe state? Or when do you call a state to be an unsafe state? If you have the resource and if you think you can very well complete the task with the resource that has been available. Say for example, if you are going to have a function in your house and if you have somewhere around 3 to 4 crores of money, and if the function cost will be where somewhere around, let us consider if it is going to cost only 20 lakhs, then you can be very much sure that you can very well conduct the function and you can make success in a grand manner, because you have sufficient quantity of money in your hand and you have such a kind of labor resources available, so you can very well conduct it. That is called as such a kind of state, you call it as a safe state. Now, what is an unsafe state? Supposing again, you are going to conduct a function which may cost a marriage function, let us consider, and which may cost an outcome of 20 lakhs, wherein you are a labor or a coolie and you earn on a daily wage basis, wherein you have saved only 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees. So, what happens here? You are supposed to conduct a function of 20 lakhs, wherein you are running short of 18 lakhs. So, here this situation is called as an unsafe situation, unsafe state, wherein this may end up in a deadlock situation. And we are not sure, I have said this may end up in a deadlock situation. And there is a possibility that it may not end up in a deadlock situation. Supposing the bride or the bridegroom comes in and if he or she is going to say that I will be spending the entire money, so no need of you to spend the money. If that is the case, there may not be a deadlock situation. And supposing the other party is not going to spend the money, it may encounter in a deadlock situation. So, such a kind of situation is called as, such a kind of state is called as an unsafe state. So that has been explained here. Now let us relate this with a real-time system example. Let us summarize of whatever we have seen in today's session. In summary, we now know how to detect and test a deadlock condition. Point number 2, we have learned the strategies for handling a deadlock, and we have learned in detail about how to prevent and avoid a deadlock. We have as well seen the types of deadlock prevention, direct and indirect, the deadlock avoidance, the approaches for deadlock avoidance. So this is the summary for this lecture. Now what are the possible questions that we can frame from this lecture is: question number 1, what is a deadlock prevention? What are the types of deadlock prevention? How do you avoid a deadlock situation? What are the approaches for deadlock avoidance? So these are the 4 possible questions that can be taken from today's lecture. So we will conclude with this in this session. The remaining examples we can see in the next session. Thank you.